Welcome to the last video of the series about the circle of fifths. In this video we will get 21 wonderful tricks that summarize how can we use this fantastic circle. So let's not waste time. Trick number 1. Major key and minor key. Let's see how to get the relative minor scale knowing the major scale. Choose the major scale, for instance D major. Move 15 minutes clockwise. The note you get refers to the relative minor scale, in our case B minor. Now let's get the relative major scale knowing the minor scale. Choose the minor scale, for instance F minor. Move 15 minutes counterclockwise. The note you get is the relative major scale, in our case A flat major. Trick number 2. Quality of the chords. To get the quality of the chords for an harmonized major scale, choose the major scale, for instance G major. The nearby chords are major, C and D major. Get the relative minor scale, 15 minutes clockwise, E minor. The nearby chords are minor, A minor and B minor. At the end we have the diminished chord. Trick number 3. Key signature. Let's see how to get the key signature. Choose the major scale, for instance D major. Get the relative minor, B minor. Remember that the D major and B minor have the same notes. The nearby notes of D and E belongs to the scale. The seventh note is next to the last note. Get the sharp or flat notes that are in our example F sharp and G sharp. The note that you have to write as alteration in the pentagram are exactly in this sequence. First is F sharp and second is G sharp. Of course, it works for any scale you choose. For instance, in the E flat major or C minor, we have as alteration B flat, E flat, A flat. Trick number 4. Chord degrees. Choose a scale, for instance C major. C major is the first degree, the tonic. The nearby chords are major. F is the fourth degree, the subdominant. G is the fifth degree, the dominant. Remember this number. We will find again for the degree of the notes and for the intervals. Get the relative minor scale, but pay attention, we are always in the C major scale. A is the sixth degree, the submediant. The nearby chords are minor. D is the second degree, supertonic, and E is the third degree, the submediant. At the end we have B, the diminished chord. Trick number 5. Functional harmony. Choose the major scale, for instance C major. The first grace has tonic function. We are at home, the release of the movement. The fourth and the second have a predominant function. They start the movement. The fifth and the seventh have a dominant function. They are unstable, they need to return as soon as possible to tonic. The sixth has both a tonic or predominant function. It's dependent by the context and by the progression. The third has both dominant or predominant function. Trick number 6. Transposition. Take a progression of chords, for instance C, A minor, F, G. Identify the key, in our case C major. Translate the progression of chords into a progression of degree. 1, 6, 4, 5. Choose a new key, for instance E flat major. Apply the progression of degrees to get the progression of chords. E flat, C minor, A flat, B flat. Trick number 7. Secondary dominant. Secondary dominant is a 7th chord useful to anticipate any chord. Choose a chord you want to get, let's say D major or D minor. Move 5 minutes clockwise. That is the secondary dominant, A7. Trick number 8. 2-5-1 progression. The progression 2-5-1 is a progression useful to anticipate any chord. Choose a chord you want to get, let's say D major or D minor. Move 5 minutes clockwise. That is the fifth, A. Move 5 minutes again clockwise. That is the second, A minor. So you get the progression 2-5-1. Trick number 9. Secondary diminished. The secondary diminished chord is a dominant chord. So, as the dominant seventh, it's good to anticipate any chord. Choose a chord you want to get, let's say D major or D minor. Move 25 minutes clockwise. That is the secondary diminished chord, C sharp diminished. Trick number 10. Modal scales. Remember, choose a tonic. On the left we have the fourth, major minor. On the right we have the fifth, major minor. Then the relative is sixth, major minor. On the left we have the second, major minor. On the right we have the third, major minor. At the end we have the 7 diminished. In the modal scales we move the tonic, but the previous scheme remained the same. So we have C Ionian, F Lydian, G Mixolydian, D Dorian, A Aeolian, E Frisian, B Locrian. Trick number 11. Parallel scales and borrowed chords. In the last trick we have seen that the first has the fourth on the left and the fifth on the right, and the sixth has the second on the left and the third on the right. The last one is the seventh. Now, parallel scales are scales that have the same tonic. The relative position of the degree remains always the same. Let's take parallel scales that have C as tonic. We have just seen that in the C Ionian the first has on the left the fourth and on the right the fifth. In C Lydian the first has always on the left the fourth, that in this case is the fourth diminished, the G flat diminished, and on the right the fifth. In the C Mixolydian the first has always on the left the fourth, and on the right the fifth, that in this case is minor, and so on. Trick number 12. Modulation. Secondary dominant. Choose a scale, for instance C major. Choose the scale you want to modulate to, for instance A minor. Get the secondary dominant that has a function of a pivot chord of A, that is E7. Trick number 13. Modulation. Diminish 7 chords. Choose a scale, for instance C major. Choose a scale you want to modulate to among A, 15 minutes clockwise, F sharp, 30 minutes clockwise, D sharp, 45 minutes clockwise, or if you prefer, 50 minutes counterclockwise. Choose one of the 4 diminished 7 chords that has function of pivot chord that you can find 10, 15, 40 and 15 minutes clockwise. So starting in C major scale, you can move to A major or F major or D sharp major scale using one of the diminished 7 chord D, B, G sharp, F as pivot chords. Trick number 14. Modulation. Augmented chords. Choose a scale, for instance C major. Choose the scale you want to modulate to among A 15 minutes clockwise, C sharp 35 minutes clockwise, F 55 minutes clockwise, or if you prefer 5 minutes counterclockwise. Choose one of the 3 augmented chords that has function of pivot chords that you can find 10, 25, 40 and 55 minutes clockwise. So, starting in the C major scale, you can move to A major or G sharp major or F sharp major scale using one of the augmented chords E, G sharp, F as pivot chords. Trick number 15. Modulation. Tritone. Choose a scale, for instance C major. Move 35 minutes clockwise from C and play the 7th chord, G sharp 7. Let's go to its tritone scale, F sharp major. Trick number 16. Modulation. Parallel keys. Choose a scale, for instance C major. Move to any parallel scale, that means any scale that has the same C tonic. Let's go to A minor scale, for instance. Modulation from major or Ionian and minor or Aeolian scale are very common. Trick number 17. Modulation. Modes. All the modes have the same notes, so every note can be used from a theoretical point of view as a pivot chord to modulate to any other scale. So choose a scale, for instance C major, move to any modal scale, for instance A minor. Modulation from major or Ionian and minor or Aeolian scale are very common. Trick number 18. Notes. The degree of the notes are the same of the degree of the chords. Choose a tonic, the first. On the left we have the fourth. On the right we have the fifth. Then get the relative minor, the sixth. But remember, we are always in the C major scale. On the left we have the second. On the right we have the third. At the end we have the seventh. You can find all the sharp notes moving 35 minutes clockwise. So, to get the fifth sharp you have to move 35 minutes from the fifth. So far, so forth. While to get the fifth flat, you have to move 25 minutes from the fifth. So far, so forth. Trick number 19. Intervals. The number of the intervals are similar to chords or notes degrees. Choose a scale, C major. The first interval is the unison. On the left we have the perfect 4. On the right we have the perfect 5th. Get the relative minor, the 6th major. But remember, we are always in the C major scale. On the left we have the second major, On the right we have the third measure. At the end we have the seventh measure. In order to get the minor scales, we can use a simple trick. We can call this trick the rule of 9. 5 plus 4, 2 plus 7, 6 plus 3, 3 plus 6, 7 plus 2. And at the end we have the tritone. Trick number 20. Triads. To get the intervals of third, you have to move 20 minutes clockwise for the third measure. You have to move 15 minutes counterclockwise for the third minor. Triads are composed by two intervals of third. The major triad has a third measure and third minor. The minor triad has a third minor and a third measure. The diminished triad has two third minor. The augmented triad has two third measure. Trick number 21. Seventh chords. The seventh chords are composed by three intervals of third, or a triad plus an interval of third. Major triad plus third measure, we get the C major seventh. Major triads plus third minor, we get the C dominant seventh. Minor triad plus third measure, we get the C major seventh. Minor triad plus third minor, we get the C minor seventh. Diminished triad plus third measure, we get the C half diminished seventh. Diminished triad plus third minor, we get the C diminished seventh. Augmented triad plus third measure does not exist because it is a triad. Augmented triad plus third minor, we get the C diminished seventh. So that's it. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the subscribe button, smash that thumb up, and share it with anyone who might be interested. That's very important. And stay in touch with us. Bye!